We can now basically turn this up, and this is going to affect the filter frequency. And you can see by the shape, we've now got a stabby sort of. Yo, you're in the studio with Leon Switch, and today I want to introduce you to the stock sampler device in Ableton Live. This will be a mini series of 3 videos covering the sampler from the basics through to the more advanced use and usage. It's by far my most used device, and still today I find out new things about it and ways of using it. A few of you may know that my first ever piece of studio equipment was my Atesz sampler, and from there my obsession with sampling and resampling began. Back then we used to have to really study the manuals if we wanted to know how to use or work with those pieces of equipment, and now things are a lot easier and laid out in a more logical, user-friendly way, although function-wise we haven't really evolved as much as you may think. Today I cover 2 of the more important pages within the sampler and hope to give you a foundation on which to start playing with and understanding what the controls do and where to find the basic elements. I hope you find this insightful and helpful, and let's get on with the video. Much love. Okay, so I've launched Ableton and I've dropped a sampler into the first MIDI track, and it's just an empty sampler at the moment. There's nothing in there. So what I did is I then found a sample that I figured we could play with. I'm going to drop that straight in on the sampler there. There's a few things to note about the sampler that are really handy. The first thing is that if we were to put the audio onto here, in fact, let's just grab a different bit of audio for the second. There we go. So that it's different. So you've got a bit of audio on one of your audio channels within Ableton. You can now drag this directly into the sampler, and this is just superb when it comes to resampling and stuff like that. It's such a good method. It's really, really, really cool. So what we'll do is we'll just come back to this other sample for a second. We'll drop that in here. We'll get rid of this. So what I've got now is I've now got the sample in the sampler, and that's now playable across the keyboard. As you can see, the sample starts at the left hand side here, and we can see that when I press a key it starts and it comes across. Unfortunately we don't have any sound at the beginning here, so we can now move the sample start point, and still we start to get wherever we want to start from. So if we come back to say here, we've got a slight click there, so let's turn the snap on and see if that sorts out. You see the playhead there sort of snapped, so it kind of moved. And we now don't have a click at the beginning. Not the most prettiest of pads, but it does what it needs to do. So the next thing I would do if I was approaching this sound with this sampler is I would now grab, let's go to the audio effects, and let's grab a tuner, and let's just tune this thing up. So let's put this after the sampler, let's hold C, and we can see that the note is an F, and is roughly 20 cents, 25 cents above the normal pitch. So what we'll do is we'll change this to an F, so we'll come down to F2. So we've now got an F when I press an F, and I've now got a C when I press a C. We can now finally adjust this, so we've got 20, so if we come down say 20 semitones, minus, not semitones, 20 cents. We're pretty much on a C. Or an F, you know, we're pretty much on pitch. Super cool. So what else can we do on this front page? So this very first page here, how I approach it. So we've obviously set the root key, we've detuned it, and we've tuned it to whatever it needed to be tuned to. Make sure that it's in tune. We've got a volume here, so we can drop the volume on the overall sample level, or we can bring the sample level up. Double click will reset anything back to normal. We've then got pan, sample start and sample end. They do exactly as I say on the tin. Sample end, sample start. You've got sustain mode, so you've got your loops now. So we can now set up a loop for this on this sample. So if I hold a key, if I turn the loop mode on, we can then see our left and right locator for the loop here. We can tell this is part of the loop because this has got the blue bar on the top here. So if I drag this loop point in, you can see the loop start is now moving. So we can now bring this in, and we can now also bring the end in, and you'll see the end of the loop end is now moving. There we go. We'll bring this back so we've got a quick loop. We haven't got to wait 5 hours for it to play. And it's not a pretty loop, but it's looping. So if we now come to the crossfade here, so this is just after the loop start and loop end, we'll go to the crossfade, and if we zoom in here a little bit, we can see what the crossfade is going to do. What the crossfade is going to do, it's going to try and grab a little bit at the end and a bit at the beginning, and it's going to try and just kind of fade these 2 points. So in theory, we should get a smoother loop. We've got a little bit of filter change there, so if we come along a little bit. We might need to adjust the length of the loop slightly. Across. And we can see with the peaks here, if we were to bring this end a point across here, or we could bring it back, in theory, it should try and loop a bit better. It's already better, so let's give it some more crossfade. It's becoming obvious. There we go. So if I bring that start point in, you're now not noticing that loop point. So that's how we basically loop stuff and we get stuff so that it's kind of almost as seamless as you can get it. You know, if you've got a sample that changes and evolves throughout, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to put a seamless loop in than if you've just got a straight note or something without any change. So if we go to the right, we've then got the detune, and this detunes the loop for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why you would want to do that. I mean, we could try, so let's just try like 3 semitones, which I'm assuming is 300 cents, roughly. There we go. So if I loop it, okay, so when it loops, it detunes. Where you'd use that, I'm not sure, but it's all good, it's there. And we've then got our interpolation. And basically our interpolation is the quality of how Ableton tries to keep the quality when you pitch a sample across keys. So if we turn the interpolation off, then if I play C3, we're pretty much at our original pitch. If I go down 2 octaves to C1, it's kind of got artifacts and it's kind of not really working so well. If I go to best interpolation, it's still kind of got the artifacts, but I don't think it's quite as bad. I mean, 2 octaves is quite extreme to be pitching a sample. So let's try, say, C2. Let's turn it off. Well, I'm not really hearing a big difference there, if I'm totally honest. But I just put it on best interpolation just so that when I play pads or when I play like chords with anything, then in theory, the tracking is going to be better quality. Not so much pitch wise, but just sort of audio sample wise is going to be better quality. So just directly below that, we then have this release mode. Basically, release mode is to do with the looping again, and it basically what happens when you get to the release phase in the envelope, in the amplifier envelope. So if I hold a key up and I let go, that point when I let go then becomes the release phase, and then that's where this point kicks in. So you can see if I go to this, so that basically what happened is it will loop while I hold the key. So I'm in the sustain phase now, and if I let go, if I put some release on it, it would be handy. So here we go. Here we go. So 5 seconds of release. So here we go. So if I hold it, so we're in the sustain phase of the envelope, and then when I let go, it hits the release phase, and it then goes outside of the loop. Super cool. So these will do exactly the same kind of thing. So it will just be, how do you want the sample to play after you've let go of the loop, after, you know. So check them out, experiment with them, and have a play. What I will cover as well in this one, because it's like the sampler basics, I will now come to the filter envelope, the global filter page, and basically this is where you can now set your filter, and you can set your amplifier envelope and stuff like that. So it's a super handy page. Let me come back to here. What have I left this on? I've turned the release loop off, and we're just looping forwards over this. Oh, I don't know if I covered this, but we've got two different loop modes. We've got the cycle loop mode, so that it just starts at point at the left hand side and plays to the right and then goes back, starts again at the left hand side, so it loops like that, you know, just forwards. It only plays forwards. If I then click on that one, it now loops backwards and forwards. So if I click a key, obviously we could tune that so that it was a nicer loop, but you can see the thing moving backwards and forwards. I'm actually just going to turn the loop off. I don't need the loop on for this. I'm going to bring this back a touch. There we go, and I'm going to turn some of the release off. Brilliant. So we've now got our amplifier envelope here, and it works exactly the same as any other amplifier envelope. So you've got your attack, decay, sustain up here, and release. We do also have this initial and peak. So the initial is whereabouts does the sound start. Does it start at 0, which isn't going to make a lot of difference without us having some attack on it? So does it go from nothing, or does it start from volume? So it's quite a handy function to play with. And then we've got the same with the initial, with the peak. That's what I'm looking at now. Peak. Whereabouts, whereabouts in this do we want the highest point to be? At what point do we want the attack to go to, I suppose? At what volume do we want the attack to go to? So with the sustain up, that's not going to make a lot of difference, but we can now see. There we go. So if I bring this back, we've got no attack on it. We've got no sustain on it, and we've only got a little bit of decay. So we've now got this plucky sound. And this all works exactly the same way, like I say, as any other envelope. So that's the amplifier envelope. Now if we come across to the filter, we've got a filter here and we've got a filter envelope. The filter is pretty self-explanatory. On the left hand side here, you've got your filter type. So we've got low pass, high pass, band pass, and notch. And then we've got like this morph filter, which is really cool. So we can now basically scroll through all of the different filter shapes. If I bring this back, it's a bit easier to see. So so we'll go low pass, band pass, high pass, notch, and then back to the low pass. Like super cool, and you can get some really cool effects with that. If I don't have it on a pluck. There we go. And you can imagine on like an evolving pad or a mid-range bass, these kind of filters are really nice to play with. But for the sake of this, we'll just go low pass, and we all know what a low pass filter sounds like. Nice. So directly below that, we've got the circuit, and this basically lets you allows a bit of drive to enter into the cutoff frequency. So you should get a bit more bite out of the filter. I'll turn it off. You can hear that it's just a bit bolder, a bit more solid, a bit more prominent, you know. So we'll turn the filter drive back on, and we'll just bring that down a touch. Nice. And directly next to that, we've then got our slopes. We've got our 12 or 24 band poles, 12 or 24 pole filters. So 12 being a slightly less steep filter, a slightly softer filter. You can see the angle changes there. So I like 24, but obviously play with it. Depends on what results you're after. We've then got our filter frequency, and we've got our resonance. So if I come to the arrangement page here for a second, and I click the A key, that turns on our automation lanes, which is exactly the same as clicking on here. And basically anything that you click on, doesn't matter what it is on the thing, apart from these dials, like the points on the filters and the envelopes, they don't work. But you have to go directly to the control itself. So if I single click on the frequency there, you can see it's now filter frequency, and we can now draw in automation for that filter frequency. If I hit play, you can see the filter frequency changing. Really, really, really intuitive, really cool. Let's delete the automation off of there. Super cool, hands-on, really, really hands-on. So I'm pressing the A key there, and that activates or deactivates the automation lanes. So if I come across to this filter envelope now, as you can hear at the second, we've got no filter envelope on there. It's not doing anything at all. It's not affecting anything. Bring the filter down, and then we go to the amount here, the amount of modulation. The modulation amount of the envelope. We can now basically turn this up, and this is going to affect the filter frequency. And you can see by the shape, we've now got a stabby sort of. We've got that sort of shape, you know. So we can then obviously we can change this. We can get some attack, so we get more of the not the slope, but we can change the slope here. I definitely feel like have a play with them. Nice, super cool. And the envelope works exactly the same way as the attack envelope, the amplifier envelope. So definitely just have a play and use it as a filter envelope. So directly below all this, we've then got the shaper, and with the shaper we've got two options, and the shaper is basically just distortion. We've got different types of distortion here, different types of shaper. So you, by all means, have a click through. Some of them are really harsh, some of them are really nice. So I like the soft one. And what we need to, one of the things we really need to take note of is the direction of this arrow. So basically at the minute, the arrow is pointing up, which means that the shaper is coming before the filter. So we're basically, if we bring the filter down here and we then give it quite a bit, in fact we could change the type. Yeah, let's bring the overall volume down of the unit for a second. There we go. And you can hear that with the shaper coming before the envelope, the shaper is being with the shaper coming before the filter, the shaper is being filtered. So the distortion is being filtered down. If we open that up, it should go pretty gnarly. So if we now click this arrow, we're now putting the shaper after. We're changing the chain. We're changing the signal flow. So we're putting the filter before now the shaper. So the shaper is gonna, anything before the shaper is now going to be affected by the shaper. So the filter now is going to become more distorted. And you can hear a massive difference there. You can really hear the filter there. And you can still hear the filter, but it's being massively affected by the shaper. So that's definitely something to bear in mind, the order of these two units here, because they make a massive difference in the overall sound. So then if we bring the filter up, we're now moving along. So our last few controls here for today, and we've got our panning, we've got our random panning, we've got our time, we've got our time key to time, and we've got our voices. So our panning is self-explanatory, left and right, whereabouts in the stereo field you want your sound. The panning random is once again, or random to pan, is once again very self-explanatory. It's every time you click a key, it's then a different place in the stereo field. And it's very random. We've then got this time function, which I've never clicked on. I'm not entirely sure what that does. Let's have a look. Maybe that's to do with the amount of, maybe to do with the time on the. Oh, I think it might be to do with the time with the envelope, but anyway, I don't touch it. The random panning can work really, really, really nice with things like hats and stuff like that. So moving along, we've got time, key to time. Once again, it's not a function that I've clicked on. I don't use it. I'm not entirely sure what it means. So I wouldn't worry about these two here, the time, ones with time written in them. I would just leave them be. I wouldn't worry about them. Everything seems to work nice without going into them. And then you've got your voices section. And this is really important. So with what we've got at the moment in the keyboard, we've got a Reese, but we're able to play chords with it, and that's not really ideal for a bass noise or for a Reese. So this is now where you specify how many voices you want to be able to play at once, so your polyphony. We want it to be monophonic because it's just a Reese. So as soon as I play another key, it cuts the previous note completely off. If I go back to say 4 or 5, if I press one key, you can hear that it plays both the keys at the same time. So if I then, with that in mind, if I this R key here, if I give it some release, maybe not 60 seconds, but there we go, that will be fine. So with this R button here, if I press the same key over and over again, let's see if I can change this a little bit so it's easier to hear. Okay, so you can hear basically what's happening is every time I press a key, it's re-triggering that sample. So it's just playing the same sample over and over and over again. So if there's release on the sample like there is there, it cuts the release off for the last note that was played and then plays your new one. So you never get any more than one version of that sample playing on the same note at a time. This can be really handy for if you have a problem with memory or your CPU is running high and you want to reduce down the amount of notes that can play at once. Because if you've got the same note playing over and over again, chances are you don't want that tail overlapping, unless you have something like a pad. In which case you turn this R off and it's basically like a re-trigger sort of style mode. And with the R off, it means you can now play as many, you can hear it's now phasing, which is implying that we've got the same note playing over itself, you know, as we've gotten stacking. So the same note is now being stacked until we get to the 5 voices, at which point it then starts to cut off like the first voices that we're playing. But in general, you can now keep the tails on all of your notes, which is super handy. So that kind of really works with some things. This, maybe not have this quite so. So if I turn the R on, you can just hear that you just get those tails overlapping. So anyway, that was the 2 pretty much most used pages for me in the sampler. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll go a lot more in depth and we'll check out the other pages and we'll go from there. So I hope you found that insightful and helpful. Have a play is the best bet, you know, and the whole concept that you can drag audio straight from the audio channel straight into the sampler is brilliant, because it means you can just resample stuff, put it in a sampler, move the start point about, play it backwards, play it forwards, loop it. You can do these kind of things, you know. So definitely experiment, have a play, and I will catch you in the next one. Big up, much love.